Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mary Willis, and I'm the interim director of the Career Development Center and also the university's internship coordinator. With me today is Daniel Gomez, who is our career advisor, very talented career advisor who works with students primarily in the College of Science and Mathematics and the Lyles College of Engineering. And we're going to go ahead and get going on what we're going to cover. So a couple of things that we want to think about is, what really is an interview? A lot of times we'll approach it as if it's like a test, which, yes, you want to be solid on your answers, but there's more to it, really. What types of interviews, both in terms of interview experience and then also interview questions that you might encounter, how you prepare for the interview, what to bring, what to wear, and really how to make a really positive impression during that time with during the interview. And so let me just start with what an interview is. And this is a lot of words, but one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this is a two-way conversation. And it's a conversation that the interviewer is really attempting to assess if you have the skills, knowledge, and experience, or confirm that you do. Because if you made it to the interview, most likely they think you have the skills, knowledge, and experience, but they want to hear more. And if you've attended any of our resume workshops, we talk about accomplishment statements. I always refer to them as the movie trailer for the rest of your story. And hopefully your resume has elicited a response where they want to hear more about what you've shared on your resume and other experiences that you have. The other really important thing that they're trying to assess, are you going to be a good fit for the company, for the specific team that you'd be working on? Because bringing on a new staff member is fairly terrifying for the employer, because I don't know about you, but if you've had work somewhere where they brought somebody new on and you thought it was going to be great, and then it turned out to be a nightmare because it wasn't a good fit, well, they're trying to avoid that. You, of course, are trying to communicate that you have those skills, knowledge, and experience needed for the position, ideally in a way where you're sharing past experiences, past accomplishments that show evidence of the skills needed for the new position. But you're also trying to assess whether or not this job is going to be a good fit for you. Now, the job in and of itself may be wonderful, but is the company or the team or the manager going to be a good fit for you? Because I'll tell you, more people leave jobs not because of money, but because of fit. So it's really important for you to make a wise decision about whether or not this company is going to be a good fit for you. And Daniel, if you wouldn't mind taking kind of the different types of interviews, because I know Daniel's been through these, so have I, the different types of interview experiences you might encounter during your interview process.
Yeah, of course. So it's something typical that I face when I apply to some of my professional jobs, like full-time jobs, and even some part-time jobs, was a combination of different interviews. Sometimes it was a phone interview, which you get to see on your screen. Sometimes these are called screening interviews, where you tend to speak with the HR recruiter or the HR staff member, the human resources individual, and they just want to confirm some of your experiences. So these tend to be times a bit brief, of more of those generic questions about why are you a qualified candidate, why are you interested in the position. So they're trying to verify information from your application. Interestingly enough, there was actually this job. I had my second interview. My interview with the actual hiring manager, the director, was over the phone, and I was a little bit caught off guard, but it was good to prepare for this type of interview nonetheless, because you want to know how you're sounding over the phone. You want to be mindful of, are you smiling when you're speaking, because they can hear that. It may sound a bit weird, but you're not in front of them, so you have to convey that energy. And it does also have some benefits, because since you're not in front of them, you can have your resume, the job description, or maybe some notes you prepare for the interview right in front of you. You can go off of that as well. So be prepared for these type of interviews, either at the beginning of the hiring process, or it could be towards the end. A video conference. Nowadays, this is a very popular choice for a lot of employers. And video conference interviews, you can think about a Zoom interview. There's other platforms like Skype, or Microsoft Teams, Blue Jeans. So there's a variety of different platforms that you may face. So big advice that we'd like to tell you is, if you've never used it, download it. Get familiar with the platform. Where's the mute button? If you want to share your screen, what does that look like? Is your camera, a fit for that type of program? Is there going to be a background noise? So you want to talk to your roommates or family members about distraction. So all these other factors that come in when you interview from your house. Maybe you want to come to the library on campus and reserve a room, so that way there's not a lot of noise around you, right? So those type of interviews where you're not physically at the site do come in with some other things to think about the environment around you, noise and distractions. With quick note on video conferencing, I think you've seen me, my screen and Mary's screen. We have a blurred background. So you want to know if you are thinking of using a virtual background or some type of fake image behind you, or just a blur effect. Is it compatible with that program that they're going to use, right? If not, make sure you have a white background, and lighting is good where you're going to stand. So yeah, there's a perfect example of Mary changing her background, which is compatible with Zoom, but may not be compatible with Skype. So yeah, you would definitely want to do this beforehand, not 5 minutes before you click the link for the interview. Other things to consider as far as the interview environments or scenarios would be, is your interview going to be with one person, or is it going to be a group interview or a panel interview? So a group interview, think of you're going to interview alongside with other applicants, and you're going to answer questions by taking turns. They'll pose a question, and someone out of the group may begin to volunteer answering, and then the next person will go, and so on. So these type of interviews do happen out in industry. I know a student applied for a local retail store, and they interviewed 10 people at the same time. And it was more of a who's going to answer first and who's going to copy each other's answer, or do you want to be prepared for that type of scenario if it's a group interview? If it's a panel interview, that means it's you interviewing in front of multiple folks, and they may take turns asking questions, but you want to make sure that you address everyone when you're answering question, not just the person that asked that question. So if it's in person, you want to make sure you are looking at everyone as you answer. If it's virtual, it's a bit tricky because you, in a way, have to be mindful that you want to make it seem that you're addressing everybody in the room. One-on-ones tend to be the more typical settings for interviews, and it could be in person. Now we talked about, could be over the phone or it could be virtually. So just because it's a one-on-one, take into consideration the setting that was going to be. And the more you advance in your career, some of your interview days, not interview experience, are going to be longer and longer. Some of your interview experiences may involve an interview with a small group of people, then go out to lunch with the potential supervisor, and your lunch itself or the meal that you share is part of the interview process. You may have a really long day, and the company may invite you to dinner as well. So dinner is still not a time to relax. It's still a time to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and showing them how you could be a great fit and someone that can get along with their team. I do come across some students applying to PhD programs, right? And they fly out and go to these experiences, and sometimes they relax at the dinner part and they forget that they're still making a good impression to the professors at that school or students that are invited to join them for that meal. So should you, go out with them? Should you, to forget that you're, making a good impression there? Never. Always think of the whole experience as a chance for you to showcase what you have to bring and who you are, and that you could be a great addition to their team. So different scenarios could come your way, but ultimately do prepare for what's coming your way. And if you need help, hopefully this workshop gives you tips for that, but you can always come and talk to us about your game plan on your interview process. So hopefully that made it more, brought those words to life.
Yeah, and a couple of thoughts on lunch or meal related interviews. Even though maybe some of the other folks are having adult beverages, and provided that you're of an age to have an adult beverages, don't, because nobody's ever gotten smarter when they drink. Additionally, hey, forego the carbonation because you don't want to, have the little burping incident. So that's no fun. On panel interviews, I always say, remember that they can't gang tackle you as well. They can only ask one question at a time. So don't let the number of people throw you. And then there's different kinds of, I left lunch and dinner in there. I was just updating this. So forgive me, that's Mary's typical typo of the day. Types of interview questions that you're going to encounter are situational interview questions. In my opinion, these are not the best interview questions from the employer standpoint, because they're the what would you do if questions. And really, you could just make up what you think they want to hear. If you do get a what do you do if question, I really encourage you to share a what did you do when answer. Which leads us then to behavioral interview questions. That's when they're going to ask you, tell me about a time when. And a technique that we encourage you to employ in answering those questions is called the STAR technique: situation, task, action, result. Also, this is the approach that we encourage you to take when crafting accomplishment statements for your resume. So you want to describe in the situation, what was going on, what task did you have to take on to address the situation, the action that you took or you as part of a group took. And the most important thing actually is the results. What happened? So thank you, Daniel, for putting that in the chat. So with that, you want to share, do you have information, hard data about how things improved? I always talk about the increase of good stuff or the decrease of bad stuff. I had a young lady a number of years ago who was an animal science major who worked as a horse riding coordinator at a camp. And she employed some new training techniques, both for the staff who would be working with the horses and with the campers. And as a result, compared to the previous year when she wasn't there, she shared with me that there was a 75% decrease in accident incidents when compared to the previous year. She also shared with me that she made a recommendation regarding the horse's feed. And it resulted in, she didn't have hard data as opposed to the other position or the other accomplishment. But what she did have is feedback from the camp administration who said, actually, that approach to feed saved them money. And then subsequently, the owner of the horses, because they leased the horses, said his horses had never come back in better condition than the year that she was working there. So think about that type of thing. Occasionally, you'll be put in a simulation question where it's not so much a question, but they're going to put you and have you actually do the task that they need you to do. And they're going to see how you handle it. Other things that could happen, although I'm not a fan, and I'd really wonder about a company that employs this interview tactic, is where they intentionally try and stress you out, because it may be where you're having the positions where you're having to work with challenging people, customer service, and they could do anything from, start the interview very harshly. And I would just recommend reevaluating if you want to work for that company, but also if it starts to go south on you, really say, hey, I feel like this has started off on the wrong foot, and I would just like to kind of reboot and start again. And hopefully that would go better.
Hey, Mary, real quick, can I add something on the
Please.
behavior interviewing? Something I tell students to keep in mind is the way those questions begin. If those questions begin with, tell me about a time, or share with us an experience, they're inviting a story, they're inviting an example, and for you not to just talk about what would you do or how would you approach it, but like concrete evidence of an example where you've done it, right, Mary?
Right.
And another thing is, I've also seen students use the STAR technique very well. They really break down their story or their example into those 4 categories, but then the example itself is very important. So be mindful of the story or the example that you share, and make sure that that's an example that shows a positive outcome if possible, or an example that shows some of your abilities or qualities that you have and could be a benefit to the employer, because they typically use these type of questions to predict future behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How are you gonna, like Mary said, how are you gonna react under stress? How are you gonna react on similar scenarios you're gonna face if you do get hired into that business or that position? So being mindful of providing good examples that showcase a positive outcome, or how you tend to address issues or problem solve, is super important, because they're
Yeah.
gonna predict from that example that you gave them.
And it's really important to give specific, don't generalize. Granted, like when you get asked the question, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker, you don't necessarily want to throw that individual and name under the bus and name them specifically, but you do want to provide, you don't want to say, well, generally what I do is, but instead say, there was a time when I had and be very specific about that time. So that's really good point, Daniel. And again, those results are really important. And the ones where you have hard data, I always call those quantifiable. The ones where you have feedback from other people is what I call verifiable. So if you don't have quantifiable, see if you've got some verifiable results. If you have both, share both. So it's really important to tell that story. In preparing for the interview, actually the number one thing is that employers have found in terms of mistakes that candidates make is having little or no knowledge of the company. In fact, I sat in an interview where the candidate said, so what do you people do here anyway? And I'm thinking, nothing you want to do. So that wasn't a good approach. So first, we're going to talk about what you need to research when you're getting ready for your interview. One of the things is you need to understand the company or the organization's either major products, services, or programs, really what they do, who are some of the key people in the organization, and if at all possible, understand the organizational structure. Also, you need to be aware, is this company a parent company of other companies or a subsidiary of a parent company? So really understand where they're at and who's involved. You want to understand their size in terms of perhaps sales or people served and employees. What key opportunities or challenges are facing the company? There might be, I just got an email from my bank it's being acquired by another bank. I don't know quite how I feel about that, but that might be a thing. Or they may be launching some new products, or something bad might have happened. What's the company culture? A lot of times you'll need to know what's important to them. What do they really value? And then you also need to understand who their competitors are and what they're, who's competing against them in the same market. what's going on in the industry as a whole. And ideally, if you can, because we were talking about one-on-one interviews or any interview, if you can identify the person who would be interviewing you and do a little research on that person, can you identify any points of commonality or points of affinity? What do you have in common? When I was interviewing at UC Merced, before I became the director there, I realized, and it was actually during the interview, that the gentleman interviewing me was a San Francisco Giants fan. And I saw it in his office and I'm like, yay, point of affinity. I'm a big San Francisco Giants fan. And so we, as the interview was wrapping up, we were able to talk about that and create some affinity. So Daniel, would you mind talking about some of the things in terms of how to research a company?
Sure thing. And this is a big part of that preparation. I totally agree with you, Mary. You want to show up to this interview having a good sense of these topics. And the way you start collecting this information could be as simple as a quick Google search. Google search the company, go to its website. Most companies at this time and age should have a section in their website called About Us or who we are, who are we, different variations of this. So definitely click that section of their website. And what you're going to find there, you're going to find a lot of the times a history of the organization, its beginnings. You're going to learn more about their services. And in the About section, you also are going to come across their mission. What is their vision? How do they see themselves providing that service or product that they create, and what makes them unique? So paying attention to all this information in there and start writing some notes on it could give you an advantage, because the question of why do you want to work here, or what do you know about our company, those are fair questions to be asked in either the first or second interview in that hiring process. So engaging with the website could be really useful. Within that About Us section, you could also find organizational charts to understand who's the main lead of the organization and all the different departments and kind of where your position would fit in. So that's another useful thing. If you're familiar with LinkedIn, you can also look up the company in LinkedIn. If they do have a LinkedIn page, the neat thing about that is think about it as a feed similar to Facebook. LinkedIn has that feature, and in that feed for the company, you should be able to see recent accomplishments, a recent award, or new projects the company or partnerships the company organization has developed or is currently working on. So that could give you a good sense of what's happening within the organization, nowadays. Another feature of LinkedIn, and I encourage all students to get a LinkedIn account, is similar to if you look up Fresno State, there's a tab for alumni, so we can see students or graduates, people that work at Fresno State. Same idea for a company. You can click on employees or people, and you can see who works there. And that may allow you to maybe look up the folks that may interview you. You can also see if we have alumni from Fresno State working at that company, and maybe reach out to them. And like Mary mentioned, that's already an affinity touch point of you connecting with them. And maybe you can ask them some questions about the company culture. And you're not just reading a website, but engaging in a conversation with an employee of that company, right? So another way to do this research is maybe talk to your professors or come and talk to the Career Center, because we can definitely help you maybe connect to folks that are not on LinkedIn, or we can share some information that we heard from previous students that we helped that was useful during the interview process. So similar to that, professors, peers, friends of your family, and things going back to the basics, Google the company and put news next to that search and see what Google produces. And there are some other websites that could be really useful, such as what you see in the screen, Glassdoor, Indeed, even Vault.com. Put the name of the company, and I'll use Glassdoor and Indeed. They do have a section, if the company has an account on this platform, where you can see reviews of the company. Think of Yelp for restaurants. Yeah, there's employees that rank their experience there. They may talk about pros and cons or feedback to the company. Glassdoor itself has a section for interview experiences, and in this section, some current employees or former applicants talk about what interviews they faced, what type of interview and interview questions they faced while being, recruited by that company. So a wealth of information is at your fingertips. All you have to do is just begin researching, and the more you know, your answers could be better tailored for your interview and the way you're answering.
And that leads us to practice. And one of the things that you want to do is create an elevator pitch or a 30-second commercial. We've got this in the Fresno, or in the Career Success Guide, which is on our website. And it's basically the opportunity to share a little bit about your background, your academic information, your experience, your skills, and your career goals and interests. And if I were going to go back to undergraduate Mary, when I was a student here, my elevator pitch might have been something like this. Hi, I'm Mary Willis. I'm graduating this year with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And I have been serving at a group home for intellectually disabled adults. And as a career goal, I'm really interested in providing services, case management services to folks or individuals with intellectual disabilities or any vulnerable population. And I really enjoy connecting people to resources. Done. And that's a great answer to the dreaded question, so tell me about yourself. So you can use this worksheet to help develop your introduction statement. Additionally, you want to review sample questions. And in the Career Success Guide, we do have some sample questions. Additionally, I would take a look at that job description and put on the mindset of, if you were interviewing somebody for that position, what questions would you ask them? The job descriptions should really help you in that regard. Additionally, like Daniel said with Glassdoor, they do have sample interview questions that people have shared that they were asked. Also, you can literally Google, for example, if you wanted to be a case manager, a social services case manager, you could Google the phrase social services case manager interview questions, and you would be surprised what pops up. The same thing for grad school interview questions. You'll find those all over the place. So take a look at those. The next thing that you want to do is, I really recommend writing out answers to questions. We take notes in class, at least many of us do. And part of that process is it helps us commit something to memory. We never want you to go into that interview and be hit with a question that you have never thought of before. Also, again, if you've written it down, you've really thought it through. You've thought it through using hopefully proper grammar, and that you'll feel more confident. I feel more confident if I've written something down to be able to share that story later. You're not going to sound rehearsed. So write those answers down, and then have a friend or a family member or somebody who's a fan of yours put you through a mock interview. Have them ask you the questions. I even used to practice, although now it doesn't look so strange because people talk in the car and have their AirPods and are talking. It's kind of funny watching people walk and have conversations with somebody else who's not there because they're on their phone, but you can't really see their phone. Anyway, I used to practice interview questions while I was driving just to get comfortable saying that. It's almost like when you want to get to a stage, you all have family stories that you've remembered over the years. So I would encourage you, just like those family stories where you can rattle off, oh, remember that time when this thing happened with the family? I want you to be able to tell the story of you in the same way. So again, it takes practice, repeating those stories again and again. And that's where having a family member or somebody you know put you through your paces. And then you also are more than welcome to go through a mock interview at the Career Development Center. And Daniel, I think you were going to share with the group a little bit about an online resource we have. So I'll stop my share.
Yeah.
And you can jump on to Standout.
Sure thing. So let me share some of the cool resources we have on our website. So if you don't mind dropping the website in the chat, Mary, fresnostate.edu/careers, I'll take you right into our homepage. And we do have a section for students. You can see this drop down. And when you click on resumes and interviews, you'll get those options again. But when you click interviews, a lot of the points or advice we're sharing with you on this workshop, or this webinar, are here as well. But I want to focus on the practice part. So we developed a quick handout that will walk you through this tool called Standout. And if you follow these instructions, let me just do a live demonstration. But just by being a Fresno State student, you can just click login, and then if you're logged into your Fresno State account, your My Fresno State account, it automatically gets you into the system. You can click on practice, and there's a few pre-created practice sets that we have in there for you to begin practicing these interview skills, right? That's telling these stories or answering questions in this platform. So some of the popular ones that we highly recommend to students are, practice those behavior interview answers. This would be a perfect platform for you to practice using the STAR concept. And you get to see some of these questions here. Give me an example of a time when you had to be relatively quick and come into a decision. Tell me about a time when you stepped into a leadership role. But hopefully you notice these type of beginning phrases when they're asking you to tell a story. So the way this works, if you have it started, is going to have the question, and right away is going to prompt your camera, and you have 2 minutes to provide a response. As you go through the experience, then what the system is going to do is going to show you what you look like and what you sound like answering that question. The neat thing about this tool is it's also going to transcribe your answer, and it could give you a sense of how you're articulating yourself and how the microphone is picking up your voice and the words you're saying. But one of my favorite things about this is also going to give you a hesitation count. So hopefully you have noticed for me is the sound or the hesitation of that tends to come out when I work with students. Phrases like uh, these type of kind of filler phrases come up, and this will help you identify what your filler the phrase or sound is, and how to work on it, what to focus on, and be mindful to not make that sound or say that the word like too many times. If you go above anything but 15 to 20 counts, then that means definitely want to practice that answer more. And with that being said, you can retry specific answers in the system or retry the entire set. You can do this as many times as you like, and it does have a feature for you to continue watching it and retrying it without a limit. Another cool practice set is the top 10 interview questions, where questions like the one Mary mentioned. Tell me about yourself. What do you know about, what do you want to work here? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why should we hire you? Some of these kind of generic popular questions are embedded into this practice set. And for those of you that maybe have a very specific field that you're going into, you can also create, let me exit out of there. You can also create and benefit from a library of questions based on your career goal. So we see accounting, there's questions on business related things, med school, law school preparations, graduate school, questions on strengths, questions related to decision making, or depending on the topic or area that you're studying. There's a pretty robust collection here, and you can make more customized practice sets. So this is a cool feature that we have. Once you do these practice sets, You can also copy the link and maybe email them to someone you trust, or connect with someone in the Career Center, and we can give you feedback on your recorded practice interview sets. But I highly encourage you, as I would like to believe that practice doesn't quite make perfect, practice makes better. And this is something that you can utilize in your computer, in your phone, and can definitely give you a great opportunity for you to rehearse, practice more your answers for interviews. So once again, this is called Standout, and it's a really neat tool that we have accessible for you. Back to you, Mary. You're muted, Mary, still.
Rookie mistake. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what to bring? One of the things, and you'll see this young lady here has a folder or portfolio. That's something that would be a good thing to bring. Obviously, copies of your resume. Don't assume they're going to have them. I won't launch into all the details of that, but make sure it's printed on resume grade paper. Also, you'll want to have copies of your list of references, and business cards might be something to bring. And I'm just going to show you an example. You can get these printed really pretty inexpensively. And all you're going to do is put your name, what your degree is in, and if you have an emphasis, your expected graduation date, your email address, your best phone number, if you have a LinkedIn account, and depending on your profession or your career goal, if having an online portfolio is important, particularly for those in the arts, including and also folks that are going into teaching, it might be worthwhile to share that website where your portfolio might be or is. In addition to business cards, obviously you want to bring something to write with and something to write on, because you may, well, one of the things that I'm going to tell you to do, and I'll just tell you now, is after the interview, I really encourage you to write down every single question they asked you after the fact. And then you also want to have a list of questions. You should never leave the interview because they're going to ask you, do you have any questions of me? So be sure to have some questions. Again, in the Career Success Guide, there are we have a list of questions you could ask. One of the most important ones is, can you tell me the next steps in the process? You need to know what to expect. And then let's talk about dress for success. I'll take the gals, Daniel, if you can take the gentlemen. And for women, now, hopefully you all know that the Career Development Center has a clothing closet. We are located in the Thomas building, which is towards the end of all the roses down the main path from the fountain. And the Thomas building, we're in Thomas 103, and we have this clothing closet of professional attire. This year only, you can select 3 items from the clothing closet. So a top, a jacket, and for ladies, slacks or a skirt. Also accessories like shoes, ties, purses, even jewelry, scarves are available. And so one thing that you want to keep in mind for most, now, one of the things I do encourage people, it really depends on the profession. And if you're not absolutely sure what to wear, A, Google it, and then B, feel comfortable contacting the company or the HR person and just say, just want to make sure I'm wearing the appropriate attire for the interview. For example, if you're going into a position where it might be a manufacturing facility, I can tell you right now, especially for ladies, don't ever wear a skirt suit. You'll need to wear slacks and non-slip shoes. So those are some of the things that you have to keep in mind. But in general, a conservative, solid colored suit, your blouse should be simple and light colored. Your shoes could be medium heeled pumps or flats. Not that anybody really wears hosiery anymore, but if you did, make sure it's non-textured and appropriate to the shoes and outfit. Your nails, if you do have nail polish, make sure it's freshly done and subtle. And jewelry shouldn't be distracting. That's the whole thing is I want you to be you to a point. Because you've got to recommend, understand the culture, understand the organization. And if some of the things that are really important to you in terms of hairstyle, which we'll talk about in a minute, jewelry choices, attire, and that doesn't fit with that company culture, you have to decide, is that important to me that I wouldn't want to pursue that position? But the whole idea is we want them to focus on you and not what you're wearing. So makeup should be used sparingly. It should complement what you're wearing. And hair, well-groomed, neat, avoid trendy looks. I know there's a lot of styles. I almost didn't get a job because of my hair, not currently, but when it was the 80s and my hair was buzzed on the side and spiked on top, and I had tails and curly Q things. And the gal, fortunately, she hired me nonetheless. I heard later that she said she wasn't going to hire any blankety blank punk rocker. So again, you have to decide. Daniel, I'm going to let you talk about what you recommend for gentlemen.
Definitely. So some lessons learned myself. Number one is you want to stick to solid colors on the shirts. I think something pretty safe to go with is like a light blue or white color button-up shirt. If I get the question, should I wear a tie a lot? And similar to what Mary was saying, I believe that you should overdress rather than underdress. So, but keep in mind the setting. Like, is this an ag-related company? Is this a more of a business office environment? And then that may allow you to decide to wear the tie or not. Same thing with the coat. Should I wear a coat or a matching suit? Business office related environments, I would invite you to wear a full-on suit, something more outdoor related to ag, depending on the environment. Maybe consider just the tie, not the jacket, if you're going to be out there walking around and it's 100-degree weather, right? So keep in mind the setting, what can help you decide. As far as matching clothes, light blue or white color button-up shirts tend to go very well with like solid color ties. Don't let the tie design be a distraction of your interview. So something in the solid or maybe diagonal, horizontal lines, something kind of very conservative, nothing really popping out with the tie. Same thing with shoes or belts or the watch you wear, any of those accessories. Maybe just complement the outfit. If you're wearing a brown belt, brown shoes, maybe a brown watch. If you're wearing black shoes, black belt, black watch. So some kind of basics of matching. If you aren't sure about your outfit, like Mary mentioned, we have a clothing closet. We also have staff member and students that we hire, and we give some advice on what would be appropriate or not appropriate to an interview. So feel free to come in and get our opinion on the outfit. But coming back to things to always keep in mind is make sure your shoes are clean. There's some folks that believe that you can tell a lot about someone based on how clean their shoes are. So make sure your shoe game is on lock. Simple hygiene. Make sure you're well groomed. That applies to your fingernails. That applies if you have a beard. Make sure it's trim and groomed and shaved. Sometimes it is safer to go clean shaved, and that way you show a very clean look. Get a haircut before you interview, fellas. I recommend at least a week before. So if you don't like how your haircut came out, you have a week to kind of grow it, make some quick adjustments to the haircut so that you don't feel uncomfortable with the hairstyle you're going in for the interview. But just making sure that you present yourself in a good first impression. If you're going to wear slacks or khaki pants, make sure they're ironed. You don't want to show up wrinkled. And then I'm sounding a bit like giving you this kind of parent advice here, but that presentation you're bringing into the interview is super important. It's not just about what you say and how you say it, but how you're presenting yourself to one of the most important days of your job, which is the interview. So I think I covered most of it. On hairstyles, if you do have long hair, make sure you groom it and it looks presentable. And back to the beard comment, it's depending on the industry. Maybe it's recommended that you go clean shaved, like I mentioned, or if you do keep your beard, that is boxed in, trim on the edges, and you look presentable and like clean cut. So that's my advice. On the suits, solid colors as well, gray, black, dark blue would be highly recommended. If you're going to go with the gray color, something that is not too distracting, or try to stay away from design suits. Nothing with, like I said, we don't want your outfit to be the center of attention of your interview. So hopefully that gives you some useful tips on what to wear and what not to wear. Cologne, if you don't mind me, I'll jump into that. I think it applies to the fellas as well as the ladies. Don't let that be the distraction or the center of attention of the interview. A light spray, or if you know that cologne has had an effect on your family members or friends, if this is really potent, if it's really strong, maybe consider a different cologne for the interview. But don't shower yourself in cologne. Maybe 2 sprays and then walk into the little cloud rather than spraying too much.
And I also always like to say, deodorant, I'm a big fan. Make sure you're smelling good, but not overpowering, because there are people who are literally allergic to fragrances. The other thing I always encourage is you've got to wear your smile. I personally suffer from that resting bee face. People think I'm mad, and I hopefully Daniel knows I'm rarely mad. But I look grumpy. So I have to be really intentional about it. So if that's something, really think I've got to look engaged and smiling. A couple of tips for making, what not to do is going to direct you as to what to do. Worst interview mistakes. We already said it, not preparing. Showing up late, basically you're done. Hang it up. You're not going to get hired if you show up late. Too early, it's good to make sure you get there on time. And if you get there early, go hang out someplace else. But I would arrive 5 to 10 minutes before. The other thing is treat everybody with respect. Nobody is below you. You don't know their influence on hiring decisions. So the reception staff, the custodial staff, anybody that you encounter there, treat with the utmost respect. Also, a poor handshake. Either I've had one of my daughter's former boyfriends out there broke my hand, shaking my hand. I'm like, buddy, hopefully you don't do that in interviews, because that's rough. Or a really kind of fishy or wimpy handshake. And you do have to take some cues from your interviewer, because we all come from different backgrounds and different cultures, and eye contact can mean different things to different people. In my culture, it's, you'll hear the phrase, look at me when I'm talking to you, especially if your kid's in trouble. And folks from my culture attribute eye contact to respect and engagement. In other cultures, that's a little different, where if you look too intently at somebody, that's disrespectful. So follow the lead of the person interviewing you. Talking too much, which I could probably be accused of. Verbal tics, Daniel mentioned those. My 2 pet peeves, just so you know, ones you really need to avoid, and I hear them all the time in mock interviews, is kind of, using that as a filter. And I will talk about body language. And additionally, the phrase, you guys, referring to me or the company as you guys. Be very careful to avoid that. Again, that failure to match communication style. If you're super high energy and they're really laid back, or vice versa, do your best to match the interviewer's communication style. Also, you need to talk positively about, even though you may not have had the best experience, but you never want to talk negatively about current or past employers or managers. If it wasn't a good fit, just say that, hey, I left because it just wasn't the best fit. And I wanted to put my talents to work where I can really fit well with the organization. The other thing is, you don't want to talk about benefits, vacation time, or salary. That's done after you are given the offer. In terms of body language, a couple things I like to say is, if possible, one thing, keep both feet on the floor. If you can, like I'm doing right now, lean a little forward as you talk. You can talk with your hands a little bit, but sometimes we get really enthused and we might look like we're doing ship to shore signals. If you don't know what to do with your hands, that portfolio is a great place to keep them occupied. And then during the interview, you want to be honest. If you do have some interesting or challenging background story that you're not sure how to handle, come see us. We'll help you figure out how to navigate some of those questions. Also be aware there's a list of illegal questions that you could be asked, and we can help you prepare in case you get asked those. We do want you to be very confident, but not cocky. You don't know everything. I don't know everything, and I've been working for a long time. But you do want to speak confidently. And for some of us, that's really uncomfortable. So one way to phrase that, if you feel better about it, is saying, I've been told that whatever you do well. And that's where telling those stories of actual accomplishments doesn't come across as cocky. You're giving evidence. And then always come out, like I said before, with close the interview with a well thought out question about the job, the company, or the industry, not something you could have found out on the website, by the way. Afterwards, really pat yourself on the back, because you'll see a blooper in just a minute, that you made it through the interview and didn't pass out or throw up. So if you did that, pat yourself on the back and look at it as an interviewing experience. I always like, when I'm working with students after we do mock interviews, I say, okay, let's discuss what went well. What do you feel went well? Great. Okay, what do you want to improve on for the next time? And do that with yourself. And then subsequently, again, write down all those questions that you could be asked again. So write down all the questions they asked you. Again, I really want to encourage you to check out the Career Success Guide on our website at fresnostate.edu/careers. And just to close out, I do want to share some actual interview bloopers that were shared. A balding candidate abruptly excused himself, returned to the office a few minutes later wearing a hairpiece. Interrupted to phone his therapist for advice on answering a specific interview question. A guy didn't know what job he was applying for. A candidate claimed he was late because he got lost, but the receptionist said she saw him hanging out at the coffee shop. She threw up on my desk and immediately started asking questions about the job like nothing happened. So preparation is going to decrease that likelihood, and you'll be able to go into that interview with confidence. If you need to get a hold of me or Daniel or any of the counselors, and you do have a counselor that's assigned specifically to you based on the college that you're enrolled in, your major. Check us out, drop by the Thomas building in room 103, or check us out on our website. Email us at careers@csufresno.edu, or give the office a call at 559-278-2381. And then if I know we're going to wrap it up, but if anybody wants to hang around to ask some additional questions, Daniel and I can certainly do that for you. But for the time being, we are going to stop recording, and we just appreciate you being with us today. Thanks so much.